All right, so this is going to be episode 5 of deck profiles for the Scarlet Violet to Journey Together format as part of the Exposé series. This episode is going to be about Aegislash. All right, so it's been a while since I did the last episode for this series, and it's mainly because uh, after examining format further, found a lot of really cool stuff, and so uh, I had a crisis of conscience almost in continuing the series because I feel like I finished the series, uh, I would have made other decks in the format feel less important, right? And so I was on the fence about finishing the series, and so um, I uh, decided to just uh, do other stuff, right? Um, and then yeah, through sort of uh, kind of getting back into the groove with the Pokemon trading card game. Found a better way of um, sort of integrating a lot of the stuff that I found throughout the format into this series, right? And so uh, I decided to, finish the series, right? So yeah, um, 'cause I basically had 6 decks basically finished, and I was just gonna do the 6 videos about it. But and finding a lot of cool stuff in the format again, right? I decided to, instead of taking those 6 lists and really just trying to highlight um, their power in the format, decided to instead take a more, which would have been more of like a deck building uh take on this series, decided to integrate some more game design oriented themes into this series so that give the series a lot more flavor, right? And so, yeah, so this list is actually not the list I was gonna originally do. Um, so yeah, this is gonna be definitely a very cool take on this archetype, right? So yeah, all right. So let's just get right into it. All right. So so this is Aegislash, right? So Aegislash, get a shot of Aegislash. Aegislash is got printed in Paradox Rift, and so Paradox Rift was the F block. It was F blocking on, right? And so yeah, that was the first F block set, if I'm not mistaken. No, no, there was a set before that. So that was E blocking on, right? And then we rotated, I believe, in Temporal Forces to F block, right? So the Paradox Rift was the last main set in the E block format, and so they were starting to introduce, basically your next, top control decks, basically for format, right? So it's been a while, so just kind of give a brief uh uh reminder of basically kind of how Pokemon makes decks, right? So that there's a more merit base take, right, in games, right, and so you have your control decks, right, and so introducing these new control decks, basically you brought Aegislash, right? So Aegislash, uh, very powerful card, right, to say the least, right, has this ability, Mysterious Shields, right, you can't read it here, but it's 150 HP, and it is Metal Pokemon Stage 2, right? Has this ability, Mysterious Shield, right? Um, Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX and Pokemon V, right? And then it has the attack Hard Bashing for Metal, and the colorless does 120 damage. Attacks damage is not affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, right? 3 retreat, fire weakness, grass resistance, right? Uh, Very powerful card, right? Especially in e-block format, right? Where you have a lot of Sword and Shield cards, uh, bleeding in to the format. Uh, this card is once you get it set up, it's a very powerful win condition, right? So there wasn't really a lot of support for metal in e-block, right? And so Aegislash, you would just have to play it. You'd have to really, really get good at the deck, right? If you were gonna play in Paradox Rift, right? Other than that, you're probably not going to opt to play this deck, right? But definitely considering that it was a control deck they wanted to support, they supported metal a lot, right? Since then, right? And so we have uh this card here, Tang, right? Can't see it right, but it's stage 1, 100 HP metal Pokemon, has the ability Metal Maker. Once during your turn, you may look at the top 4 cards of your deck and attach any number of basic metal energy cards you find there to your Pokemon any way you like. Shuffle the other cards, put them on the bottom of your deck, right? And then it has the attack beam for metal and 2 colorless, does 60 damage, fire weakness, grass resistance to retreat, right? So, I mean, yeah. So Temporal Forces card came out in Temporal Forces, and you got your metal support, and so Aegislash definitely got huge power spike in Temporal Forces, right? So um from a game design standpoint, this deck would be like your um it'd be like your super tank deck. If I just had to use a really crude analogy, right? Don't take it too seriously, but yeah, if you've played a lot of like MOBAs, battle RPGs, right? You're familiar with that, you know, class of tanks, right? Where they're just so like sticky, right? And they're so they do so much damage relative to the damage you can do to them, right? And that's essentially what they're trying to go for with Aegislash, right? Is that it would be that style of card, right? So that's essentially what Aegislash is, right? And so yeah, right. So you basically want to just like that's the mindset you want to take when you're playing this deck is that it's like that type of style of tank, right? And so um that's how you should approach setting up your board. That's how you should approach the whole like unfolding of the game, right? So let's just get into your openers, right? So of course you're gonna be playing 400s, right? So right, playing 400s from Paradox Rift, only 400s in the format anyways. There's 200s. There's this Honedge, right? The cut up, and then there's also the Honedge that I think it does 30 damage. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, does 30 damage and does 10 damage to itself. So this is just gonna be a whole bunch with more longevity. So leading into the tank theme of this deck. So yeah, gonna play these right. So you play 4 copies, and so you just open them, right? All right. So those are your first opens that you want. Then your second openers are gonna be your Beldums from Journey Together, right? So these are 60 HP Beldums from Journey Together on retreat cost, right? Psychic type basics, right? Have the attack spin and attack. For psychic energies does 10 damage and has beam. For 2 psychic it does 30, right? You play 4 copies of these, right, as your secondary openers that you want to open, right? Then play 4 Buddy Coffins, right? So Beldums and Hone Edges are both less than 70 HP, so your Buddy Coffins can target both the Beldums and Hone Edges, so you have effectively 12 opens to your basics, right? And then if you don't open them, right, you can just say goodbye to your hand because you're playing 4 copies of Professor's Research, right? Discard your hand, draw 7 cards, right? All right, so that's generally how you're gonna look at your open, right? You have 12 outs to your basics that are direct outs, and then if you don't out open any of them, then you can just discard your hand and draw 7 cards. All right. So these are gonna be like opens that are gonna be interspersed, uh, into your opens, right? So you have 4 copies of deduction kit, right? So this card reads: look at the top 3 cards of your deck and put them back in any order, or shuffle them and put them on the bottom of your deck, right? And so these are basically gonna be like opens that you want to have interspersed, right, with your Hone Edges, your Beldums, and your Buddy Poffins, right? So you can make more informed decisions, right? Then also the next openers you'd also want interspersed with those are Dradens, right? So play 4 copies, right? Draden reads, look at the top 7 cards of your deck. You may reveal a Pokemon and a trainer card you find there and put them into your hand. Shuffle the other cards back into your deck, right? So you open your Honedge, you open your Beldum, you open your Buddy Poffins, and then, you know, these help you basically kind of set up your board, right? And then your last open you want to play is Mew EX, right? Mew EX from 151, right? Restart ability. Uh, Once during your turn, you may draw cards until you have 3 cards in your hand. It has the attack Genome Hack in for 3 colorless energy. Choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks. Use it as this attack, right? Free retreat, darkness, weakness, fighting resistance, right? 180 HP basic. This card is very powerful in this deck, right? Is that uh, it's a free retreat, right? So acts as what's called as a pivot, right? And then uh, pairs very well, right, in this deck, right? Which we'll get into, right? So those are your openers, right? That's basically how you want to look at your openers for this deck, right? So main extenders, right, are gonna be these guys right here. Metangs, right? So you play 4 copies of Metang. These are the Metangs from Temporal Forces. You have the ability Metal Maker, right? Once you're in your turn, you may look at the top 4 cards of your deck and attach any number of basic Metal Energy cards you find there to your Pokemon any way you like. Shuffle the other cards and put them on the bottom of your deck, right? So you're gonna get these guys out on top of your Beldums, and then you're just gonna Metal Maker, right? And you're going to just try to basically just get a feel of uh, the top of your deck, right? So that you can make more informed decisions, right? With your Dradens, your Professor Researches, etc. Right? And then you have the secondary openers, secondary extenders rather, or Doublade. They play 2 copies of Doublade from Paradox Rift. I believe there's 2 copies of Doublade in Paradox Rift 2. Right. So yeah, you have these guys. You have this guy that has Swords Dance, and then it gives you more damage onto your Slicing Blade. Right. So it's kind of like a 1-2 punch, but you're definitely just gonna want to just get as much value from your new blades as you can if you need to. So play these, right? Play 2 copies, right? And so again, right? Um, so this is Aegislash deck, obviously, right? And so may seem odd, right, at first glance that you're playing, um, you know, uh, you're playing a lot of copies of Metangs, right, and then not too many copies of Dual Blade, but can actually cover something very important here that is very key to understanding Dex power levels, right? And it's a concept known as leverage and RNG. All right, so um, kind of wish I had like a graphic to really highlight this concept, but it's all right. Um, kind of just highlight this part of the video or anything like that if you want to really explore this concept again, right? But basically, what leverage and RNG is basically how you um make a deck, you know, make a deck, right? And allow the player playing the deck to express their skill level, express their trust in the deck, etc. You know, without it seeming very unfair. Is the best way of putting it, right? So, right once you get to Aegislash, a lot of decks don't really, have a way to get around it, and so if you were just able to just get to Aegislash and just win, right? Obviously, that wouldn't be unfair, and it wouldn't really prove anything uh, from your perspective as a player, right? So, what uh, obviously, what you should consider, right, when you're gonna play this deck is that, right? First of all, and if you were wanted to look at from Pokemon's perspective, right, they've considered that, right, and so in making of this deck, right, you wouldn't just, basically just try to get to Aegislash as quickly as possible because what you're doing, right, is you're basically taking power from other parts of your deck and you're putting it all into the Aegislash, right? So that even when you get to the Aegislash, right, although it's almighty or whatever you want to call it, right, it's not as powerful because you basically just rushed into it, right? And so that's basically how you balance a deck, right, when you're making it, right? And so that's kind of what you want to understand when you're playing this deck, right? There's a lot of cool decks in the format, all right? Again, just to before I move on, that sort of have this as a very key mechanic, in their game design, right? So maybe I'll do a more extravagant uh highlighting of leveraging RNG, another deck profile video, but for now, just take that as you will. All right. So the other uh standard that's gonna get you into those is Perrin. All right. So Perrin is play two copies, right? Very common card that you want to play in control decks, right? And so yeah, if you're not hitting, your Beldum, your Metangs, and your Hone Edges off of, all your openers, then you have your two parents, right? And that effectively gives you 8 outs to Metang and Dual Blade. All right. Not only that, also, you have the Dradens as well, right? So effectively you have 12 outs to your Dual Blades and your Metangs, right? So if you're not getting into your main extenders, right, then your opponent and can shake hands, right? And you can play Iono, right? So this deck plays 3 Ionos, right? And I'm gonna get into why this deck plays 3 rather than 4. But yeah. So Iono reads, each player shuffles their hand, puts it on the bottom of the deck. Either player uh puts any cards on the bottom of their deck. In this way, each player draws a card for each card of their remaining prize cards. So this card, yeah, that's what you want to do. But one thing I want to highlight, right, if you haven't, for kind of, if you haven't really like played the card game, or you're not familiar with the format, right, is that this card has an error in its errata, right? The errata is basically the text that dictates the rules of the card, and it says that if if either player puts any cards in the bottom of their deck this way, each player draws a card for each of their remaining prize cards, right? So, uh, like that's actually an error in the errata, because even if you have no cards in your hand and your opponent has no cards in your hand, you can still play this card, right? And you'd still draw, right? Um, but so yeah, right? Um, I don't know which condition in which you wouldn't be able to play this card. I think the only condition that errata would actually matter is if Iona was the last card in your deck and you drew it, then you wouldn't be able to play it, I think. So, but I think even it's no, if you're it's the only way you wouldn't be able to play Iono is if you drew Iono, right? It's the last card in your deck, right? So you have 0 cards in your deck, and the only card in your hand is Iono, and then your opponent has 0 cards in their deck, and they also don't have a hand. I think that's the only reason you wouldn't be able to play this card. So, and the reason why this errata is so confusing is because there's a lot of cards where if you don't have the conditions to fulfill them in your hand, you can't play them. And so this errata is kind of confusing, right, to a newer player because of that. But just understand that you're not gonna the errata is generally not gonna be important. The conditions to fulfill that errata, that part of the errata, are so specific that it doesn't really matter, right? But yeah, so yeah, again, right? If you're not drawn into your do blades, parents, and your hone edges, just shake hands with your opponent. And you can just play Iono, right? 3 copies, right? Then your other extenders for the deck, right? Play Super Rod, Power Pad, 1 copy of each, of course, right? Then you play a Miriam, right? So Miriam's very powerful in this deck because this deck wins, right, by having a very big board, right? And so if your opponent is able to dispatch your board very well, right, you're still going to be able to win, right? Even if it's like they have two prizes left and you have six, as long as you can just get your board going, right, then you could come back from like the most devastating board states, right? And so you play one copy of Miriam in case of that, right? Then play Grand Treat, your ace spec, right? So Grand Treat reads once during either player's turn, that player may, let me pull it up here because this card is kind of hard to read. But yeah, once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a stage 1 Pokemon that evolves from one of their basic Pokemon, put onto that Pokemon to evolve it. That Pokemon was evolved in this way. That player may search their deck for a stage 2 Pokemon that evolves from that Pokemon and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. Then that player shuffles their deck. It has this clause here in the bottom that says players can't evolve a basic Pokemon during their first turn or a basic Pokemon that was put into play this turn. Right, so basically, this card is very complicated, no doubt about that. So kind of try to explain it. So essentially, this card, uh, well, to use the card first, you have to have a basic Pokemon on your board, right? And then you there has to have a basic Pokemon on board that can evolve, right? So that's the first thing, right? You can't just search your deck with this card. That's if I'm not mistaken, right? And this card can only evolve basic Pokemon. Sorry, just had a little interruption there. So this card can only evolve basic Pokemon into stage ones, all right? And so, for example, if you had a stage 1 in play, you couldn't use Great Grand Tree to evolve it to a stage 2, right? So again, right, you can only evolve from basic to stage 1, right? And then once you evolve from stage 1, you can search your deck again, and if you have a stage 2 that can evolve into that card, then you can put it on the stage 1, right? So you can effectively go from basic to stage 1, stage 2, as long as you can evolve, right? So yeah, this is basically just an extender, to basically just blindside your opponent, right? That's the best way of putting this card, right? Then you play one copy of Pheasant Deputy EX. All right, so uh, one Pheasant EX, 210 HP, Dark basic Pokemon, has the ability to flip the script, right? Um, right. Uh, once you're in your turn, right? If any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn, you may draw 3 cards. You can't use more than one flip the script ability each turn. Then it has the attack Cruel Arrow for 3 colors. So this attack does 100 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Right? Fighting weakness, no resistance, one retreat. Right? So this deck, right? Again, right? To fit into the theme of the deck, as being a tank deck, right? You put a lot of really cool, you know, Pokemon behind the tank, right? Then it turns into like a raid boss, right? And so that's kind of why you want to play Pheasant Deputy in this deck, right? Even though, once you set up the Aegislash, you definitely don't want to have a lot of Pokemon on your bench that are not one prizers. So again, right, this card is not an opener, right? You can open it, right, if it's the only basic in your hand, but it's not an opener that you're trying to open, right? So don't think of this card like I just have to get it out as soon as possible. That's why I'm covering it in extenders. It's because it's an extender. It's not an opener. But you can open it, of course, right? Which would just be, again, unlucky, right? And that's just part of the leverage and RNG concept, right? And your last extender is one copy of Rare Candy, right? Choose one of your basic Pokemon and play. You have a Stage 2 Pokemon, Stage 2 card in your hand that evolves from that Pokemon. Put that card onto the basic Pokemon to evolve it. You can't use this card during your first turn on a Pokemon, on a basic Pokemon that was put into play this turn, right? So in this case, uh, you're not really in a rush to get your Stage 2s, but this version of the deck uh, has a win condition that requires a lot of different stages of Pokemon in play. So you just want to have this card in your deck so that that condition is easier to use, basically. Right. So that segues very well into the win conditions for this deck. So of course, this is an Aegislash deck. So your main win conditions are Aegislash, right? So you play two copies. These are Aegislash from Paradox Rift. Again, we've covered this card already. Play two copies, right? Again, leaning into the theme of leverage and RNG, right? And so you get to this card, and once you get to it, again, you're not going to need another one, right? It's going to be very hard to knock this thing out. So yeah, you just play two, so you have one, and then if you prize it, right? Or again, if you want to just play down two, then your opponent's going to have a tough time, right? Then you play the Aegislash EX, play one copy, right? So Aegislash EX, 330, Stage 2 Metal Pokemon as the attack Peerless Edge. Uh, for one metal, does 70x. This attack does 70 damage for each prize card you've taken. Then it has the attack Double Edge Slash for two metals, does 220. This Pokemon does 30 damage to itself. Alright, so this is effectively just a finisher in the deck, right? Uh, and again, if you're familiar with Aegislash, right, in the core games, you know, Aegislash has two forms, right, as part of its ability, which is called stance change, right? And stance change, anytime it uses an attack, like an offensive attack that does damage, and it changes into its sword form, and then it gains, 150 attack, 150 special attack. And then once you use an attack that's a status move, right? No, it's not even a status move. Once you use the attack King's Shield, you have to specifically use the attack King's Shield. Uh, then it turns into its shield form and it gains 150 defense, and 150 special defense, and then I think it switches between 50 attack and then 50 special attack, and then 50 defense and 50 special defense, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, so that's basically what this Aegislash EX is basically the sword form of Aegislash. It's very ironic that again, right? You can see that it's in its sword form, right? If you look closely at its art. So yeah, very clear that they were trying to depict this card as a sword, and then this card as the shield, right? Because that's it in its shield form in the core games. So yeah, right. So yeah. So if somehow your opponent can get over your Aegislash, you have an Aegislash EX on the bench, and you've taken prize cards probably, and then this attack you can just use the first attack, right? As like off cooldown, right? And yeah, there's no conditions. All you need to do is just power it up by taking prize cards. So yeah, that's the kind of skill expression part of the deck, right? And yeah, you play one copy because it's a finisher, right? So once you get it open, you don't need another copy. If you prize it, oh well, right? So then your other win conditions are Metagross. These are the Metagrosses from Journey Together. 170 HP Stage 2 Psychic Pokemon. Has the attack Whack Down, Rack Down, 1 Psychic, does 60 damage. They can join beams. 2 Psychics, 130 plus. If Beldum and Tang are on your bench, this attack does 150 more damage. So if you have Beldum and Tang on your bench, this attack does 280 damage, right? Then it's Dark Weakness, Lightning Resistance, 3 Retreat, right? So uh, this card um, is from Journey Together, right? And so what I find really cool about this deck is that you're playing the Beldums, right, from Journey Together, right? Then you're playing the um, Beldum Matangs, some 4 forces. Then you're playing the Metagrosses from Journey Together, right? And you can actually play these cards in that combination because they're all considered part of the same evolution line, right? Which is something that's going to be very, 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 very. I can't understand this enough. It's going to be very important to understand, right? In playing these formats, right? For set I mean for I block, right? So yeah, something that's going to be very important to understand. So this is very cool that I can highlight this video too. So yeah, uh, so again, right? They're psychic, right? It's a psychic Beldum, right? Metal Matang, and then a psychic Metagross. It doesn't matter. You can play them in that combination because they're part of the same evolution line, right? And you can further clarify that with this flavor text right in the top corner, right? Says evolves from Matang, right? So since this is a Matang card, right, then you can evolve this Matang into this Metagross, right? So that's essentially the deck, right? Then for your resources, play 12, right? And then you play 8 metals, right? And you play 4 psychics, right? So um originally these 4 psychic energies were 4 metal energies, right? But instead we're playing the psychic Beldums, I mean the psychic Metagrosses. So instead of playing 12 metals, you can play uh 8 metals and then we can just play 4 psychics, right? And still fits very well into the deck and it actually increases the deck power of the deck significantly relative to just playing it with metal energies, right? So just to kind of give an idea of the original list for this deck played these Beldums, right? The Beldums from Temporal Forces, 70 HP, metal basic Pokemon. First attack did claws, 10 damage for a metal energy. And then second attack, Iron Tackle for 50 damage for metal and 2 colors. Pokemon also does 10 damage to itself, right? Then you played the Metagrosses from Temporal Forces, right? These guys, 180 HP Stage 2 Metal Pokemon. First attack, Meteor Mash. During your next turn, this Pokemon's Meteor Mash attack does 60 more damage. And the second attack, Luster Blast. For Metal and 3 colorless, does 200 damage. Discard 2 energy from this Pokemon, right? So this deck would have just had a more consistent build to it, right? But you're definitely, sacrificing a lot of power and not playing, these Metagrosses, right? And you're also decreasing, the skill level of the deck as well, right? So you can see how, those things, kind of are intertwined almost, right? In this case, you're playing Psychic Metagrosses, right? And the deck's power level goes up significantly because you have two types of attackers, and then you also have the 280 damage attack, right? So the skill level of the deck increases significantly, right? But also the power of the deck, right? The skill ceiling rather of the deck. So the skill level, right, of the deck increases, but also the skill ceiling increases as well, right? So yeah, so you play four metals. I mean 8 metals. You play four psychics, right? So that's the deck, right? And I'll just flash the list real quick, right? Right. So yeah, then I'll just go over some lines so to give you an idea of how you want to play this deck, and then yeah, close this video. So right, so again, right, you're playing Aegislash, right? So ideally, if you have like a hand, let's just uh kind of just give you like a example hand, right? So ideally, you're gonna want, you know what? Actually, just put the deck together. I'm gonna shuffle it and then sort of take a look at the hand I get. All right. So just gonna shuffle the deck here. Right. So I have the deck together. Right. Just gonna shuffle it. Right. So ruffle. Right. 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 I'll just cut it. Right. So just take top seven. Right. For setup. We'll just take a look at this hand. Right. So this hand pretty neat actually. So I'll just call. You know, flip a coin just decide if I'm going heads first or second. Right. So I'll just call tails. Right. Right. And I got tails. So I definitely want to go second in this deck. So I'm just gonna go second. Right. So I'm just gonna take 6 prizes off the top. Right. So right. So I have my prizes here. Yeah. Right. And so this hand, let's just take a look at it. So we have Beldum, a Hone Edge, right? And we have Niono, Super Rod, Rare Candy, Tang, and a Miriam, right? So going second, right, which is ideally what you want to go, right? Um, Obviously in a game one, right? In a game one, obviously I'm not gonna get too deep into uh Pokemon trading card game philosophy here, but go first in the game one, right? Second rather, go second in the game one. Uh, a hand like this, right? Probably gonna want to open a Hone Edge, right? You're going second, right? So you're gonna want to open a Hone Edge, right? And so, right, your line here is that you're gonna want to bench your Beldum, and you're just gonna want to play Iono straight up, right? And so, what you're trying to do here, right, is you're basically maximizing your chance of getting an attack on your first turn, right? So you play 8 metals, right? So Hone Edge attacks for 1 metal energy. So you just want to open it, and then Iono, then you're gonna want to draw into a metal energy. That's what you're trying to do, right? So just look at the top deck. So the top deck is a Beldum, right? So you're just gonna bench the Beldum, right? And from here, honestly, you're not gonna want to bench any more Beldums, right? You want to just have 2 Beldums out, right? And so, uh, you have your Hone Edge, right? And then you have the 2 Beldums, right? And you opened nothing else that can get you into Hone Edges or into anything like a Pheasantipity or a Mew. So you don't want to, set up too many Beldums. So you just want to get your Beldums out, and you want to just get into a meta energy. That's your first goal, right? So you just play on, right? And then that's generally they're gonna want to approach a hand like this. All right. So uh yeah. Um yeah. Right. That's a pretty good hand, right? Prizes don't matter. But so that's generally how you're gonna want to approach something like that, right? So sort of to give you kind of more idealistic look at an open, right? Let's say you want to open Hone Edge, right? So you open Hone Edge, and let's say you open like a Buddy Buddy Poffin, all right? So if you just open Hone Edge and Buddy Buddy Poffin, you're going second, right? You're gonna use the Buddy Buddy Poffin, and you're gonna search out 2 Bellums, all right? So the reason why you want to search out 2 Bellums, right, is because basically you're gonna want one to use as a metal maker, and then your second Beldum going to be a target for your psychic energies. All right. So play 4 psychics, right? And you're going to be drawn through them. You're going to be drawn into them throughout the game, right? But you want a target to attach them. And the best target, actually, not the only target, is Beldums, right? So you want to get 2 Beldums out as quickly as possible so you can have targets for your psychic. Ideally, how you want to play this deck, right? This version of the deck, rather, is you basically want to um, get out 2 Metangs, right? All right, so you have 2 Bellums. You get to 2 Metangs. Then you're going to be using Metal Maker on your turn, right? And you're going to be targeting your metals, right? And your metals are going to be attached to Hone Edges. All right. So that's essentially what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to get out 2 Beldums, and you're going to use Metal Maker to attach metals to Hone Edges. All right. That's essentially how you want to approach this deck, right? And you don't want to attach metals any other way except through Metal Maker, right? Unless like you absolutely have to, of course, right? Then your attachment for turn, right? The manual attachment you get for turn is going to be a psychic energy onto a Metang or a Beldum rather, right? So what it does, right, is the minute you get psychic energy onto this Metang essentially becomes online, right? So now if you draw into a Metagross, you can just evolve it and you can start attacking. Right? It doesn't matter how many psychic energies it has, it can attack. Right? And then that gives you like your like that is like the most powerful attack in your deck, right? Is this Metagross. Right? So that's essentially how you want to approach this deck to not get too, deep into it. And so yeah, you wanna, test this deck, take a look at it. Um just keep that uh section in mind. So keep that section in mind, right? And refer to the section, you know, if you want to sort of get a more beginner look into this deck, right? So that's the end of the video. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you in the next video.